There we go. Can everyone see me, hear me, whatever? I think it's working. I'm not quite familiar with this sort of software at all. I think I've used it once, but I'm not sure. Seems to be I've got visual on myself, like, because I've got another tab up. But so I just thought I'd film this because I honestly wasn't sure really what to talk about or what to do today, because I'm actually using my older laptop, hence why the resolution's different, because I'm not actually using my normal video camera. I'm using just my old laptop, because my new laptop has really bad resolution, so I tend to use my video camera. But I think this is working. I think definitely there is visual, so I'll see how it goes. Hi. What am I going to talk about first? So first, I should probably just introduce myself. My name is Rebecca. My channel is Specialist Ichthyology. So I specialise, although it says ichthyology, and ichthyology is the study of fishes, I specialise in loricarids. And so I study them I've studied them as part of my university courses, and hopefully I get to study them further through a doctorate or something, but that depends on like funding. I've also got 6 years, nearly 6 years, a few months of 6 years experience in the aquarium trade. I've worked in 3 different stores, so a small independent, like a semi-independent. It had like 4 stores, but by the time I finished, like, that had all changed. And then I worked in a large chain. I'm not going to name any of them because it just makes it easier. But mostly I focus on science. So I study the evolution, so focusing more on the morphological evolution, and I've got a real interest actually in diets and dietary niches, so how an organism evolves its body shape to what it's eating. So that's why I think it's so important for loricarids, plex, to study this. And so if my computer's a bit funny, it is older and it's a bit does strange things, and I don't think the keyboard's always entirely working. So I've got a few questions up already. Once my keyboard actually works, it is touchscreen, which makes it easier. So the first one is, I think I can show it. So this one is looking at fish meal, and I've done quite a few videos and I've done an article. I won't fish it out because I've got so many like books and magazines over there on diets and on different plex, fishes, all sorts of books, science textbooks, and just it's a clutter bookshelf. But so I have talked about fish meal, and fish meal, I don't think I've discussed it in as much detail. So fish meal is a questionable one. It's in a lot of diets to boost that protein source. And I think this is largely because fish meal is cheap. It's a byproduct, most likely a byproduct of the fishing industry. So it does come from stuff like herring, mackerel? Sort of very small fishes, and it doesn't have to be that those fishes are small for their entire life. It can be that they are it's just in that stage of life. The thing is with fish meal is because they are obtained like that, there is actually a really large environmental impact from fish meal, and it has caused a reduction on quite a few species. Fish meal in regards to actual as a protein source, I don't think is actually too bad. Like as a protein source itself, this is going off what I learned at university, that a lot of fish will exploit cannibalism, especially when they're younger, just because there's so many similar proteins and it makes it a lot easier to digest. The thing is also on fish meal is a lot of these fishes that we're feeding it to aren't piscivores. Piscivores meaning they feed on fish. So it's not a natural diet, let's say. So they might not actually have the enzymes and bacteria. So these are sort of the biological units, I'll say, to help break down fish meal. But so I haven't actually looked at studies on it, and I really should have beforehand. But I wouldn't say it's the most natural diet, especially when we're looking at lorcarids, many of which might feed on fish, but I don't think I've really seen it recorded, and if they do, it's as a detritivore. Another thing on fish meal, I had it in my mind, but I've absolutely forgotten it. But there's other sources like insect meal. Insect meal, I question on B12 content. Not all of the insects actually contain as much B12, which is a vital vitamin that you need to feed any sort of animal that comes from, well, mostly animal products. They have to consume as a type of bacteria. I believe that's from what I found. And mealworms were quite low. Crickets were really high, and then a few other things were higher. The other thing I say on fish meal is I'd assume it's cooked. So cooked or dehydrated, so that loses a lot of nutrition. But some fish meals might contain diaminase. I doubt it just because of the fact that it's cooked. But it's worth something considering. Fish meal, I think, if you're feeding piscivorous fish, it's not as bad. But I'd rather focus on something a little bit more natural, because although there's not as many studies on the topic, it might not be like it might not be processed as well as something maybe a bit more natural. And I know we're dealing, when it comes to insect meals, we're not dealing directly with what they'd feed on in the wild. So there is that real disconnect there. And I feel that really with algae as well. But you can't really get exactly what they're feeding on in the wild, especially when it comes to real taxa level. Some of them are, well, the real species level, genus level, some of them aren't just economically viable. So I hope I've covered that. So I'm not totally against fish meal, but I'm not totally for it. And I think there needs to be a lot more research and a lot more people sort of looking at it and questioning it. So next question by Josh B is, what's it? So care requirements for spawning L34, which is Ancistrus ranunculus or the Medusa pleco. So I've not actually spawned the species, but I've got quite a lot of experience of keeping them, and they're not an easy species to keep. And I've written so much about it. I've got a few videos on the topic. So I'm going to count L255 in what I say here, and maybe a few other ancestors are quite similar. So cave size, from when I've seen people actually spawn them, and I've noticed a real preference. If you ever see some of my videos, you might notice that I have these really flat caves. So they're sort of flat and go back a little bit rather than square or rounded caves. They seem to show a strong preference. And every time I've seen this species bred, they usually go for those caves. I think other species I've seen actually have a preference for those caves as well. I think maybe Parancistrus aurantiacus. They seem to have preference for those flat caves, and I think it's where they live in these sort of fissures in the wild, and they're very flat-bodied fish, Ancistrus ranunculus, and quite a few Ancistrus, so they're adapted to these sort of flat fissure kind of cave that's not very it's not very sort of tall, but it might be more wide. And I do think the most important thing these are gregarious fishes, and it is actually in their scientific paper. The most annoying thing about the scientific paper that describes Ancistrus ranunculus is it's only available in paper format as much as I've found. So it's in the paper, what's it? Exploration of fresh water, is it? Something like that. So I managed to actually source the paper in a library. They are gregarious, so I wouldn't keep them less than 4. And I find sometimes even then they struggle, and they can go on for like quite a few months, and you think you're out of the woods and you're not. Temperature also, I wouldn't go below 28. That's when I started. Part of my problems were keeping them too low, and also gregarious. It's quite often to buy plecs on their own. I think they're cope, but it's not always the best idea. So some of them are gregarious, some of them are territorial. So I would say keep the minimum of 4. Doesn't matter if it's mixed males or females. I find them really social, and they're not particularly or really territorial at all about guarding a space. Diet, I treat them like herbivores. I feed them with pasture, soil and green, and I would go for something maybe more herbivorous if it existed. They're very fussy feeders. I find once they're on Apache, they might feed on something else a little later on, but that's about it for them. So I wouldn't feed them anything really carnivorous. I assume mine might have fed or have fed in the past on EBO, but I don't buy that brand anymore. So they might have, but generally I wean them into captivity on Apache Soylent Green. Other things about them is just really temperature, so their social, diet, and loads of hiding places. They're very slow feeders. They don't compete well at all. So whenever I sort of weaned them into captivity, it was practically on their own and really high flow because of those high temperatures. And when they come from the Rio Xingu, where that river is quite high flow, they do exist in a lot of the cracks, the sort of caves. So they're not. So they might exist in places which have high flow surrounding it, but sort of lower flow. You know, where they're actually living, but they will travel between. So, just going down, looking at questions. Advice on diet for cactus plecos. So that's LO24. So cactus pleco covers, Pseudocanthus. LO24. Now, I have really bad dyslexia moments when it comes to LO24 and LO25. So one's Pseudocanthus pitanga, which is one of them's the scarlet, and one of them is Pseudocanthus. Also, I should put that one on the thing. So one of them is Pseudocanthus pitanga, other Pseudocanthus pirara, and they look really similar. So pirara has a more distinctive marking. It's usually more brightly coloured, but I find there's quite a lot of variation in that species. Pseudocanthus pitanga is the scarlet, and that's a sort of redder. So it's really difficult to explain, but they're very similar. So I'll cover both of those because me and the L number system, don't always get on, and I'm learning them, but I prefer to use scientific names. So if you look at the diet of Pseudocanthus, they are generally restricted to carnivory. So they are the actual true carnivores opposed to like Hypancistrus. So the Pseudocanthus, they feed on stuff like so you're looking at insects. I don't think they're particularly noted for eating mollusks like Scobinensistrus and Leprocanthus, but it has been noted that they will sort of work their way around a snail, and that might be a really interesting thing to actually feed them. So I would potentially, you can buy snails that are already killed for culinary reasons. But I personally, because at least for escargot, the way they're dealt with is with a lot of salt. So I'm not really sure if it's a good idea to go that way. But there's plenty of other snails to get in their diet. If you want to give that a go. With insects, you've got stuff like Apache grub pine, Apache bottom scratcher. You could try actually quite a wide variety of diets because of that aspect of carnivory, but quite a lot of diets do contain a lot of vegetables, a lot of algae, which might not be so ideal. Other than that, you could actually look more into the reptile trade with like feeding dabia roaches, as long as you can get them to sink. A lot of insects on their chitin casing, it sort of collects air. So it means that when you put them in water, they just float. So you'll see it with like spiders, flies, crickets. So you'll need to somehow hold it down. Luckily, they're not covered by sort of any legislation. So you could find some way of sinking it down. Just saying. Other than that, earthworms would be a good one. I did feed earthworms to Scobinensistrus, and they were really keen on them and working their way around it. They sort of broke it down. So I'd really try earthworms. You could get them in reptile shops listed as Dendrobia and as lugworms, is it the big ones? Can't remember. But just try and look at carnivores with loads of insects. They do eat sponges in the wild, so freshwater sponges. So these are the same structures as in marine, but the freshwater, like taxa groups. If you can find something that replicates that, but I don't think any brands really contain it because they are so slow to grow. So you're looking at something that grows like millimeters, not even a year, like 10 years or something, I think, for sponges. So they're not really entirely viable. So another question. I do know of Spa Shop because I actually come from Hampshire. I didn't actually go to Spa Shop. I did my A levels, my college. It depends. So in the UK, you have school, which is till 16, and then post 16 to 18, you have sixth form, college, something like that. So I actually went to another college and did A levels. I was looking at doing ornamental fish at a Spa Shop, but they don't actually do the course anymore. And I think the year I was deciding, they didn't have it. So I actually did A levels biology, geography, and environmental science, and then I went on to University of Southampton to do biology because I was like, rather than focus, I'm not interested in marine biology. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do sort of the general things, so I get the idea of a wide range of biology, and I can really use that to understand what I'm really interested in better. So I studied topics like biochemistry, ecology, evolution. Obviously, I then focused on evolution. I also did a lot of physiology. But Spa Shop is a really amazing looking college. When I last went, I think that's just after they dropped the fisheries for ornamental fisheries. They still do was it like coarse fisheries? I think coarse is just carp, isn't it? But they have quite a lot, and they've got like zoo license. So they did have their pandas. I don't know if they still do. But I have visited their aquatics, and it was really cool to see the range of things. I'm not sure whether the course even runs at all or what it's certificated by, because I know you've got animal management, and that can cover a bit of aquatics, should they choose to. But I would have liked to really go into maybe do a short course in aquatics. And I did, I've done a master's as well, but not Spa Shop. Yeah. So just going down. So there we go. Aquarium Gardens has listed different worms that you could buy in the sort of reptile shops, and it's best to wash them off first before you add them, but they do sink quite well, and I've used them for quite a few things. I don't know. I do question whether they. I don't know about the entire nutrients, because I think when you're feeding them fresh, they're actually really good. But dry foods of worms, I find, don't get eaten, and they have like a grey white colour, which really makes me think. But that might just be due to the amount of worms, like compared to what else was in the diet. But I think actually feeding fresh worms might have a lot more, vitamins and minerals. So Craig's asked, would you say ancestors L255 are harder than L34? So I don't know. I think they're pretty much the same. The only thing is with L255, I found is there's so much limited availability and the price is higher. That makes it more tempting to get a pair or singular. And that's where it causes the issues, because it is a real... well, it is quite a high price tag for what is, for one that you need multiple of. But I would say they're possibly the same. When I kept them actually as a group. It didn't make it difficult in a store situation, because I was like, yeah, the spotted ones are this price, the non-spotted ones are like half the price. So I would say maybe they are harder in the fact that you got more running on it with the price tag, and then they're a lot more difficult to get in. I only saw them on a list twice, maybe on the Brazilian list. Whereas Citrus Vinuncus was more or less consistent, and also on American list, and even on Asian lists where they've probably been sent from South America to Asia and then back to the UK, given the price tag as well, which does happen, and they're not often bred, so that probably brings up the price a lot more. And the same for L255, not many people have bred them, and I think every time they've been brought in, because of how low the numbers, people, like everyone seems to buy a pair, there seems to be this awful mortality, and then there's none for ages to find. So then I've got another, so Sequem Gardens. I've never heard of that course at that college. I don't know, because I'm like, so where I came from, Hampshire, everyone either went to Sparshot or they went to the range of colleges for A level. I think also South Downs College also did animal management, but not fisheries. I think the main thing is there is such a low subscription for these courses, and I don't know whether maybe part of it is maybe the like job opportunities from ornamental fisheries. Whereas, like with animal management, you hear about a lot more people going to like veterinary and stuff. So I don't know if that's part of it. Whereas, like my college, I don't think even offered any. Oh no, it did offer BTECs. It started to do them. I think because I get really confused because now I'm working with this system. I get really confused because it's like it's a whole different system in a way. But yeah, I do freshwater, and that means that, yeah, so it just means that I'm almost entirely on a different, like, I'm always doing like different, so especially when I went to Southampton, there's either the biology people or there's the marine biologist, and then there's also zoologists. But then I was like, I went to marine biology to do anything they had with fishes. Then I did like a module in geography because they had one freshwater thing there. And it all got like, there's not many people interested in freshwater. And to be honest, I've never really. So at my undergrad, I think there was one person. My A levels, I've never met anyone that. During my A levels, no one was really interested in marine biology or any sort of aquatic biology. So it kind of made it a bit like difficult, so I was kind of jumping between things. When it came to my masters, then I was the odd one out. Everyone else was like interested in the whole range of things, and I was just like, fish, that's it. So although one of my projects was on corals, it wasn't one like it was one because when you're studying molecular stuff, there's a lot of funding involved, and to try and get the funding as a master's student to study catfishes especially is a little bit difficult. So yeah, and I do find, I wish I did, like in your college you said you've done dissections. Like I wish that I could have done more with my university and sixth form and all of that, because I think it's really important. So a lot of my stuff has been like self-taught. Especially, yeah, dissections. We've done 2 frogs, 2 fish, and a heart. I think that's like total. Whereas if you do like BTECs and stuff, you have that much more selection and the opportunities too. Although I've heard that you get teachers get a lot. Well, any organisation, if they offer dissections, they get a lot of complaints. Like during my undergrad, we got offered to do a salmon dissection, and they were told, if you don't want to do it, just say you don't want to do it before we order the fish. And the amount of people that came not telling that they didn't want to do it, and there was loads of fish that didn't get used. Yeah, so when I saw it, I don't know, with the scoping ancestors, I think it just more or less just chopped it up, and then I stopped to really feed it because we only had so many worms. So I tried to feed it to everything that was really fussy to feed. So largely it was puffers, because obviously you got when I'm feeding like a lot of the painful fish, like painful is in difficult to feed or in the sense of a store. So that was like the puffers. So I had quite a few that you'd really have to try crossing off things and then trying again, stuff like that. Okay, so it's gut loaded worms. I would have a wormery. I did actually have a wormery once. It didn't last. But so I don't know, like gut loading to me is quite logical when it comes to live food. And even if you're going to pre-kill it before feeding it to the fish, I wonder about with gut loading how much is already processed by the animal and broken down and whether that affects it. But I've never actually researched gut loading because generally with the fishes I'm dealing with, they're not really going to feed on something that's gut loaded. And I am sort of researching different diets, and I would like to especially have a colony of something like either roaches. Roaches would be a good one. Crickets are good, but they drive me absolutely nuts. Just the fact that they always escape, they're loud. What else? They're just fast. But it is worth, if you're looking into certain fishes, actually to sort of build a colony anyway. A lot of, I found especially working when you have reptiles as well, makes it a little bit easier, especially in stores. Whereas if you're working specifically with fishes, you only have the fish live food unless you buy it in. And the fish live food, especially some places, can be really restrictive. So, yes, I think it'd be nice to see a lot more availabilities of different foods. And I've always said it, that stuff like different availabilities of, different dry foods. Not many foods actually contain different ingredients. Like I can look at Vitalis and it contains practically similar or the same ingredients to something like, other ones. Tetra was actually surprising that it wasn't actually that bad in comparison. One thing that I have questioned a lot recently is the use of vegetables. So I don't know for people, there's a lot of assumed similarity when it comes to plants. And generally what I've learned is generally that algae are outside of plants. So a lot of diets will replicate algae with plants. So it's like comparing, using, I don't know, something like instead of feeding someone beef, you're feeding them, maybe even going lower down, saying a jellyfish. And a lot of plants contain, there's a lot of, loads of different proteins, loads of different sort of carbohydrates that make it a lot more difficult and different to digest. So since I've reached the end of any questions, so what I was going to talk about, I had a few ideas. So I was going to so I could talk about like evolution and stuff of fishes, which I find quite interesting. And I've been watching I watched a video today anyway, and there seems to be a lot of, I don't know, there's always a lot of debate on when it comes to evolution and stuff like that. So I did watch a video, and it was by a very popular YouTuber, popular that I've never seen the person mentioned, and it was suggesting things about fish evolution that was actually incorrect. So mainly one of the things I always like to say is be careful who you trust when online with information, because this person claimed to be a fish biologist, and to be honest, the term is it doesn't, just because you say you're that doesn't mean you're paid for it. Professional generally means you're paid for it. So I've never been paid for my science. So am I a professional ichthyologist? Probably not, more of an amateur. But am I paid to be a fish keeper? Yes, I am. So I'm a professional. So if you get what I mean there. So I think it's really trusting. And this person well, the terminology was entirely messy in places. So stuff like firstly the evolution of chordate. So chordate, you've got vertebrates, which is the big group that includes tetrapods, which are mammals, birds, reptiles. And then you go down, you've got fishes down. It doesn't mean they're less evolved. And then at the end, you've got the hagfishes, which are jawless fish, lamprey, also jawless fish. The evolution of which is closest, debatable. I think it's still lamprey are closer to the rest of fishes. Lamprey, I mentioned in another video, they contain a lot of similar features, but hagfish contains a cranium, which is a brain, but no, a brain case, but no vertebrae. But outside that, a lot of people will look at the outside groups and look generally on the body shape and say that looks really similar to that. It must be that. But that's no different from saying that a shark looks like a dolphin, so they must be similar. So what a few people have done, especially when you look at evolution, it is always a hypothesis. And that's what this person didn't seem to understand. And the fact that they places lancelet most closely to vertebrates, which is wrong. It's most likely euchordates, because euchordates actually show as a juvenile state, and ones which show neoteny that they're more closely related to chordates, but there is debatable phylogeny. So I've got another question before I go on any more detours around evolution and debatable stuff. So if I could have one tank and stock it with any fish in the world, well, my favourite is the Ancistrus ranunculus, and I'll be more than happy to do that, to be honest. Like, this tank does contain a bit more now, but if it was just Ancistrus ranunculus, they're low 34, I'll be happy with that, because they're so interesting to watch. Saying that, my tank over there, because I got a large female who's now actually feeding on courgette, which shows how well Pierre has actually looked after the fish just after import, because sometimes they're such a nightmare to feed. But that one's got only the discus. Oh no, it has got banjo, so brunocephalus, but it has got mostly the mangoes, and just because I've got that large female. And since getting her, I now look at all of my others and think they're like tiny. She's not, well, she's about 15 to 20 centimeters standard length. Think she's female. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers, but it makes all my others look like dwarfs. So it would have to be between those Ancistrus, or it would have to be between those Ancistrus ranunculus especially. I do like my agaboensis. I would have like Ancistrus macrophythalamus and stuff like that, but I think when I only have 2 aquariums, I'm trying to keep it calm, keep it low. And I think that's really important. But I also really enjoy Barancistrus because they're such dramatic fish to watch. They're always doing something. They have arguments with each other, which can be a little bit serious at times. And they can be active. It's just having them sort of in the right tank. So that's the Barancistrus chrysolamus. I moved my Xanthellus into here for now, at least, because I want to see how she copes with the other 2, with 2 of the males, the juveniles in here for now. So it'd have to be between those 2. And Ancistrus ranunculus is my favourite fish. I've got a statue of it. I won't get out. It's behind quite a lot of specimens. But I've got a statue of it. I was given for doing a talk. So it'd have to be those. I used to really like Asian arowana, and I have looked after a few, and they are brilliant fish. They are a tad dull, but also personable. Like this one I had really bonded with. It did sell, and it did, I don't know, obviously when you're in a store setting, you're only limited on setup. So it did develop a drop eye, and also a gill issue, which I assume what must have happened is it's hit some top of the glass or something. So I do really like them, but I don't really entirely plan on having Asian arowana. So this is kind of ended up listing fish I really want, which I try to I try not to do that too much, because otherwise you just end up with an endless list. So it kind of gets a bit difficult, and then you end up hoarding and having so many, and I try and avoid that. Especially I live in rented accommodation. I am in a first floor flat. But actually got to get the fish tanks up the stairs. They don't even have a lift. And then I've got to actually fit them in, and then I worry about the flooring. Like, if something breaks, I'm going to have a heart attack. So, that will just freak me out. So I just try and keep it calm, especially for now while I'm invented. Like, I've got smaller setups I could potentially set up. Yeah, so Debia roaches. So I've actually, this year's the first time I've actually been looking after them and trying them. I don't know if I'd actually be able to get any juveniles myself, and I do like the hissing cockroaches as well. And I don't think any of them release any toxins at all. I'd have to research that before even trying to feed. But I don't really have any kind of a species. They are really easy to feed, any roaches, and they're really easy to breed. They're really interesting to watch, I think, especially hissing cockroaches. They have, we studied it at biology, the breeding behaviour, where the males will sort of fight between each other and they show off how to impress the female. So I'm a bit worried, I'd recommend them, especially if you've got kind of a species, and I think it's well worth devoting the space to that. Especially if you have Scobian and Cistrus, Pseudocanthicus, Leprocanthicus, devoting space to some, even the sort of substrate dwellers, devoting space to those feeders would be really beneficial. Worms are really easy to keep. Saying someone who managed to kill a colony of earthworms, they should be easy to keep. And if you've got a compost heap, as long as you don't use anything like no pesticides, I'd avoid anything with fertilizers. As long as you just use natural stuff in there, you get loads of earthworms. Like my parents' one, you'll see them all along the top, especially with the heat. It gets so warm there. It probably makes it really easy to breed them. I've said about wood lice in the past. They're a good possibility. None of these insects, arthropods, invertebrates, because earthworms are annelids, take up much space. I've actually got a colony of blackworms, and I always forget to feed them. I always forget to change their water. I actually have a really bad phobia of worms as well, like annelids. So they're just sat there and they just take up no space. They're in a jar underneath the snake's vivarium. I can't think of anything else regarding feeding. So I've never actually bred cherry barbs, and this sounds really bad. So I've actually never kept barbs myself at home, and I've only ever kept one species of tetra, which is lemon tetra. And so my some knowledge of them is in the shop setting, and same for I have had celestial pearl danios or galaxy raspora. So I can only talk from the fact that I've worked with them, not actually bred them myself. I've seen plenty of books using marbles for breeding danios or danios, however you want to say it. I just say it how I do. Using marbles where you have a tank, you have marbles at the bottom, 2 or 3 layers of it, and then just drop the eggs in. Then once they've spawned, you remove the parents. Spawning mops would potentially work. I know it's been done. You do it with goldfish, and they are scatter spawners or broadcast spawners, I think would be the proper name. So something like that. Potentially, I know Cambodia. That species is now banned in the UK, hence why I don't remember its name. But something similar could actually be a good alternative. There's hornwort, because they're cold water, so let's say unheated, you could keep them with hornwort, stuff like that, and that would be like maybe a more natural way to get the eggs. But I've never actually bred them, and I've never really wanted to, if you get what I mean. So, and I do plan on getting maybe tetras again, but probably barbs I do really want. Just none of my fish actually correlate in temperature entirely with barbs. Actually, when I was a kid, my dad did have cherry barbs, and they are stunning fish, especially the males. But I kind of like the Demonsoni barbs and filamentosas barbs, but they just need such a big setup. So I don't really plan on having barbs for at least a long time. Oh, and I do love tiger barbs, especially the natural coloration of tiger barbs. They're absolutely gorgeous. It's just they never correlated with any of my setups, and I kind of look, especially for temperature, because some of the other things that you can, there's a little bit of flexibility. Diet, generally, I don't know why, I've always gone mostly for herbivores, and I've known that I've never really had the setup for, well, I've got the setup, but I'd have to rehome those my fish for anything like carnivorous. So, and I tend to, when I go to a fish shop, I look at the bottom there. So when I went to Pear, I should remember someone asked me to check for sort of like pike caracins and stuff, and I just looked at the bottom there, so I didn't see it. Although I saw the true parrot cichlids. Is it hoplacus? I love hoplacus. True parrot cichlids, gorgeous fish. I saw them. Saw the zebra pikes, which is Quinis cicla zebrina, something like that. So I'm not really anyone to ask on barbs. I don't know any groups on barbs either, like fish keeping groups. I know there's one on caracins. There is one on danios, I think that might be worth asking. There's loads on live bears, and obviously catfishes there's plenty. So I can't really give entire advice on cherry barbs that well. So with a sort of advice with caution, maybe. So yeah, live foods with diamondase rich plants, and I never actually thought of that, because I did, when you first look up diamondase, it generally, a lot of the pages are like maybe aimed more at either people that eat fish or people that have a paleo diet or something. I think anyway, but diamondase rich plants, I really need to research which are which. I tend to, because I'm looking more into feeding algae, I don't actually use particularly plant matter. Currently I am trialing for my barons, it's just using courgette in replacing it, but around sort of 24/7, maybe out quite a few hours break, maybe replacing trying sweet potato, because they're grazers, they're feeding all the time, so I'm trying that. But I don't really look at plants, and diamondase rich plants, the only one I really know is bracken. So bracken is, all I know of bracken is it's the large fern. You know, when you're walking through woods and you see the ferns, which are really tall. That's all I know of diamondase rich plants. I know a lot of aroids. So this is an aroid. They contain, I think, maybe it's oxalates or something. They're generally toxic to a lot of animals, but to fishes, they don't seem to be as much of an issue. Saying that, it depends on the amount of it. So I do know people that have had pothos and it's been eaten by araru, sevum, stuff like that, and had no issue. Pothos is also an aroid like this. This is Monstera sp. It's too big. It's going to get the chop because it's actually taller than me, and the moss pole ain't holding it. So I don't know what to do really, because I like these long leaves. It's just the cheap one you get in stores, and I've just grown it for 2 years. But another thing I've questioned about diamondase is its effect on piscivorous fish, which would be interesting. Whether there is one, because I know garter snakes have issues with diamonds. But it depends what fish they'd be eating, and they're freshwater. I mean, they're sort of terrestrial snakes. They've got to be eating marine fishes, which is a general risk for diamonds. But then there's not really as much of a comparison in reptiles when it comes to eating diamonds-rich fish naturally. Whereas with fishes, I'd assume generally it'd be looking in the marine world for fishes, for ones that maybe have some adaptability. I'm not sure. But I do find the argument with diamonds quite interesting. And potentially other plants, other toxins, and also whether there's not much known about vitamins and minerals, whether you can get overdoses. There's not many studies on it, which is a real shame. So when I try to find ideal volumes of different vitamins and minerals, there wasn't much on it. And generally when you're looking for this, you got to look more at specific taxa. So, and it was kind of like they look at channel catfish. I can't really compare that to loricarids because they have entirely different diets. So generally anything can be a toxin anyway, just saying, beyond a certain amount. So you can get overdose of almost anything. But there isn't much on it, so we could be overdosing, we don't know. I think sometimes we get away with diets because of they're so low nutrients almost that malnutrition can take a lot longer maybe. Because you hear about, especially with like people and stuff, living on like the amount of people that live a long time on certain things, and sometimes it's just a fluke. Like I've heard about Pacu feeding on human food and living for like 20-30 years, and then you hear about like with people they have like a glass of some really strong alcohol every day and then they live for decades, live for what, 100 or more. So there's a lot about it we really don't know, even about people, and then let alone fishes. And then when you look at diets, it's like when you're looking at a diet, like when you look at your own diet, you don't go and look at for diets for let's even say chimpanzees. Actually no, chimpanzees isn't the best example. Let's go with one that's close-ish. Actually, bonobos, I'm pretty sure they're herbivorous. And they're sort of, I think they're subspecies of chimpanzee, or they're another species, really closely related. But orangutans, they're herbivores. You don't look at their diet to compare what you should eat yourself because you've gone down this evolutionary path. Your enzymes are different, your gut is different morphologically. So body, the shape of it, and then also the bacteria are different. So, thanks. What was it? Cut the worm in half, then tetras. So I guess that depends on the size of the tetra as well. But whereas the only tetra I had were lemon tetra, and in stores, obviously I have looked after other sort of, let's say, other calicins as well. So stuff like myatinis, which are like silver dollar things. I think they're a type of silver dollar. Of course, they would enjoy something like that. I think they're actually more herbivorous naturally. And I did try feeding them on plant matter and it didn't go too well. But yeah, the cutting the worms really helps. And I think earthworms may be something we do miss as a live food. And I'm not sure, I never actually did ordering of live food, plants or dry goods. I only did fishes, so I wouldn't know whether it was actually on the list, because of course some might do reptile food as well, so then they should. And one thing about snails is, I'll say, for just side thing, people who want to feed snails, you can actually get them in reptile shops. I wouldn't know how. I don't know if those sort of landsets, I think they do float is the only issue, but I wouldn't really be able to say how to euthanize it ethically or safely for the fish. Maggots as well. Oh, I don't like maggots. You can get like fishing shops, they're really cheap. So they're really good. I just don't like maggots, and breeding them would be a bit of a hassle. If you had like small surface feeding fish, maybe juvenile archers, juvenile leaf fish, stuff like that, or even leaf fish, maybe getting a what's it? Is it no, Dendrobius earthworms. What am I thinking of? Drosophila. Using Drosophila and their feed on the surface. Drosophila are actually really interesting. They're used a lot in scientific experiments. So where they come from, so Drosophila, they're used in scientific experiments because they're so easy to breed and so easy to manipulate. So you can use, I know it's a sidetrack, but you can do genetic experiments, look at, say, Hox genes, so body plan, that influences, say, where legs grow. You can also influence the eye gene, or as a site on the genome, also found in mammals, which influences where eyes grow. I should know the name of that gene, but I've forgotten. But that can cause eyes to grow in different parts of the body. So they're actually quite interesting. And I think I would assume the flightless fruit flies, which are Drosophila, you buy are generally bred that way. But there's a lot of genetic modification in Drosophila, because it's just that's how you can identify actual genes. And then if you move them around, you know what they do. So hence ectopic eyes, which are eyes maybe located somewhere down elsewhere on the body plan, and hence Hox genes, extra legs. Don't think you could get an extra head. You probably could, and it's not the same thing as polyploidy. Polyploidy is where organisms get extra limbs. So I've seen it in ducks. You extra limbs and also extra fingers. That's a gene called the supersonic gene. Sonic hedgehog. That causes you to get extra fingers and stuff like that. There we go. Hi, Alyssa. So she's also got same surname as me. There's one other YouTuber that actually has the same name, but not as a surname. It's not actually that common. I've never actually met another Bentley, which is really interesting. So there's not many of us around, and especially as a first name, I have met obviously Bentleys before, but it's pretty cool. Especially I'm in the UK and she's America, and she also breeds and keeps different plecs. So yeah. Chile. I've never actually. I don't really know. Chile, South America. I sound so bad when I don't know where places are. I like my A level in geography. I swear it was a fluke because I have no idea where places are. But I think it is South America. I have been to like Brazil and stuff, and I would like to go to like Peru, but I don't really know much about Chile. I think it's South America anyway. So I think that's I've reached sort of the end of questions and stuff. And what is it? It's about 9 o'clock here. So I'll probably end the live stream now. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you like my videos, please comment, subscribe, whatever. I might do more live streams. I might do interviews. I want to do one with Alyssa. And maybe other people on different topics, maybe looking at different fishes and stuff. Oh, I've got another question. Just in case. Okay, it's just a quick one. Oh my god, I don't know if I can make things quick. Yes, they are shy feeders. What's it? So this is Parenticius of Antiochus. They're not actually L56. I don't know why it's a common thing. The L56 is a Sudan citrus that's not actually seen in trade, but the Parasistrus rantiacus, the true one, is a Xantho changes colour. It does it quite rapidly and quite solid coloration. I've done a video on it. They are really shy feeders and really slow, and I have seen them not eat with fast feeding fish. But I would feed at night. I'd feed a mixture of things, especially at first. So trying courgette, trying yes, I know it's bad. See whether they do feed on mussels. Just as something to get them eating, especially as they're wild caught often. Moving on to something like Repashy Soylent Green, something like that would be a really good diet. Also, we're just thinking maybe more herbivorous than a lot of sources suggest. They are really shy, so I'd feed at night, feed in somewhere you know it hides. So I maybe using tweezers, that's what I'd do. And trying a range of things, but once they get feeding, they're usually really good. As long as you don't move them to a different setup, then you almost start again. So it's mainly making sure the tank is quiet. Also, make sure you got the temperature right. 28 degrees would be my minimum. Otherwise, they can have issues with breaking down the food and actually processing it. So I think I've covered that topic. Anyway, thank you for watching. I might do other live streams if people really want. Thank you for watching anyway.